My name is Curtis Bennett. I'm the Director of Equity and Community Engagement at the National Aquarium located in Baltimore, Maryland, as well as an advisory council member of the Maryland Association for Environmental and Outdoor Education. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to our final symposium as part of the four-part series focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, and accountability and accessibility. For MAEOE, we believe that these issues are at the core of ensuring an environmentally sustainable future for all Marylanders. And we know that while we may not be where we ultimately want to be, each and every day we are committed to taking steps to ensuring that this work continues to be integrated and interwoven in who we are, what we do, and how we do it. We are very grateful for the funding for this symposium, which is provided by the state of Maryland for further development of Maryland Green Schools. Today, we conclude our four-part series with a focus on creating welcoming and safe spaces outdoors, which will be moderated by Dr. Mamie Parker. We will be recording the session so that it can be shared with those who cannot attend. And with that, I'd like to introduce and welcome Dr. Mamie Parker.
Thank you so much, Curtis. And thank you for all of your work that you do to support MAEOE, and you're certainly a strong voice for them. And we appreciate having you in that position. I'd like to also give a shout out to the MAEOE staff for bringing us these great events over the last month. They've just been outstanding, and a lot of us have learned from them and grown from them. Again, I'd like to do as Curtis has done, say welcome to all of our participants that are out there. I see many of your smiling faces, and I'm happy that you're there. I apologize that I am in my car. I am near Quiet Waters Park, about to do a graduation speech after I'm done with this. So my apologies, I couldn't be in both places at one time, but it is my pleasure to be here today. And I'm grateful for this subject. It's near and dear to my heart. And in fact, we've had a series at the National Wildlife Federation. I serve on that board on this subject. And what we found is that there are several, challenges that we have to overcome when we think about creating safe and welcoming spaces outdoors. Representation is certainly one. The lack of childhood experiences is one that we have, and also cultural experiences, just having that experience outdoors or with our families or whatever. But we also have to acknowledge the historical trauma that many have faced when they have gone outdoors, when they didn't look or act like some of us. And so today we want to talk about those. We know that there are microaggressions that occur in this environment, not only for Black and Brown people, but also for women in this space. And so today we're hoping to get to all of those. We want you to know that you are in a space of grace and mercy. And that's what we try to practice in this space. We practice gratitude because these are learning experiences, and we're not here to pass judgment. We're here to really stretch ourselves and try really hard to crack open all of these issues and see how we can be more and do more. And so, and have the courage to really address those, which is something many of us have not had over the years. In fact, some of us have sat in silence and we haven't spoken out because we were afraid we would offend someone. But these two ladies that we have here today, they have been, as Amanda Gorman, when she spoke at the inauguration, said really strongly that you have to be brave enough to do it and to be it. And these ladies have been willing to open their hearts and their minds to share with you all today. And so I hope that this will be I know that it will be a wonderful experience, and I'm looking forward to it. Let me just tell you about our two guests that we have here. We have Teresa Morris, and she has worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for over 20 years and a multi-generational Maryland resident. And she's devoted her life to conservation after some many childhood experiences and stories in the outdoors. She went to Virginia Tech, where she studied forestry and wildlife. And then she worked at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Chesapeake Bay field office here in Annapolis, where I am. I've watched her grow over the years and get chill bumps when I think about her career in the Fish and Wildlife Service, where she served as an endangered species biologist, but also chief of migratory birds, conservation, and chief of staff at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And now breaking history, making history, being a history maker as the Deputy Assistant Director for Science Application. And that's all so near and dear to her heart, because she really believes in science. And joining her is, I'm so excited about Michelle, and look at that smile on her face as I talk about the fact that she's come from Bogota, Colombia, and moved here with her family in 2000. She studied at the University of Maryland, College Park, graduated in environmental science and policy, and with a concentration in wildlife ecology. But she had a moment in her life where she wanted to do what she wanted to do and followed her passion. And now we're grateful that she is, after working for the Maryland State Parks from 2014 to 2018, she's recently decided to take a job in multicultural outreach coordination in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And so welcome, ladies. We're so happy that you are willing to join us. We're glad to have you. So next, before we move on, though, we do have 2 videos that we would like to share with you all before we get started, and they'll just kind of lay some groundwork here for us and put these subject matters in context. And so with that, we're going to show those videos right now.
The big thing that you experience while you're on the refuge is nature, and nature in its many forms.
I hear this all the time from people out here. They live in the metropolitan area, just a few miles on north or south of here. And you come out here and you feel like you're miles and miles away from civilization. And you see nature as it's meant to be.
Places like this really do offer people an opportunity to connect to something that feels right, that's inspiring to them.
We know that we have an opportunity in a place like this to have a connection where kids don't have to go far.
To connect a new generation of young Americans to the outdoors, to create a vision that we'll replicate in other great urban environments.
We want to build that foundation or hold up the community, because it's in the community where the visions are taking place.
This was a start, you know. If this connects to one child, you know, we done our job.
So to have this oasis of real natural wildlands in the middle of the urban area is a very special thing and a very important thing for us to have.
All right, so one of my biggest pet peeves is when people say they don't see Black people outdoors doing stuff. And what I like to say is, like, if you don't see Black people outdoors recreating where you're doing it, it does not mean that they're not outside recreating, they're not outside hiking, they're not outside skiing. It just means they're not doing it where you are doing it. And y'all need to ask yourself why that is.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those with us, Laura, and we appreciate that. And so now I think we'll just get right into the discussion here. And so this is story time. This is like a story core where we're going to have each of you ladies to talk to us and tell us some things about yourself. But I have a few more questions and that I'll ask you. Where would you like to live? Cave house, tree house, or she shed?
Treehouse.
Tree house. And why is that?
Well, I love trees. My shirt is ginkgo trees. I even have a tattoo of it. And I would just love to be up in the canopy. And I don't think I would want to live in a cave at all. So treehouse.
Treehouse, trees, yes, yes. Okay, Teresa.
I agree. I would think a view from a tree house would be outstanding.
And a good escape, right? A good getaway, right?
That's right.
That's right. Okay, mountains, oceans, or a river? Where would you want to be? In the mountains, on the ocean, or on the river?
Mountains.
Because?
Same reason. That view is really important to me.
The view.
I like to be able to see far.
and you, Michelle?
I would say oceans. That's my first love. Growing up, I wanted to be a marine biologist. So I think anywhere by the water is where I want to be. I feel like it makes you feel so little, just like the mountains do. But I just love that salty, breezy air.
Great. Okay, well, that's a good segue in terms of growing up. So, here we'd like to hear your story. First, before you started, I'm interested in the last question of being, just talk to me about one of the biggest challenges that you've had as what I once called an underrepresented person in conservation. But after our last workshop that we had, we were told to say underestimated a group of people, which I absolutely love. So your challenge, and then we're going to talk more about, tell us a story. So about your life and how you got here. But we'll start off by saying your biggest challenge.
Michelle, please.
Michelle?
So I would say for me, the biggest challenge is being a young Latina wearing a uniform when I worked for the Park Service was something that our uniforms don't differentiate too much from our seasonal clothing. It's the same colors. And whenever I would go up to a group and tell them, oh, you can't do this, or something that they didn't want to hear, they would always ask for my supervisor, as if I wasn't the supervisor. And most of the time I was the duty ranger. But I feel like I just wasn't taken seriously. Even by fellow employees when I first started, I kind of got that tokenism, as if I was in that position because I was Latina, not because of my background, not because of my education or passion or skills. But I feel like I've always been pretty underestimated by my peers and those in the public.
Yeah. So Teresa, you have something to add to that, your challenge.
Yes, the same, underestimated. I think even though I've been with this agency for almost 25 years, years, people do what they tend to do, which is infantilize those that they feel are lesser than them. I'm constantly treated as if I'm inexperienced. I'm told I'm inexperienced. And this is, again, I was the longest running chief of staff of this agency. And I still encounter people to this day who just assume that I lack experience or understanding, that I'm not a real biologist, as Michelle had mentioned, that I was put into my position, whatever position I happen to be in at the time, because of my race or gender. What's even worse is if I feel like I was put in my position because of my race. When I know that I bring so much more than that to the table. So the first thing that I hope folks here today is when you have diversity efforts and there are diversity hires or diversity candidates, or you bring people in as a cohort of diverse candidates, that sets us back tremendously, because that's all people see. They don't care about our GPA or our performance as students. They don't care about our performance within our agency or organization. They view us first and foremost as a sympathy hire or something attempting to reach a quota.
Yeah.
And it makes us a lesser than.
Yeah, and but I think that's where leaders, if we have leaders that are out there listening, how they can really help, don't you think? Because I recall going into a meeting in the assistant secretary's office, and there were people all around the table, and the assistant secretary at that time was Lynn Scarlett, and she came and sat right beside me. And she started talking to me. And then during the meeting, she said, well, let's find out what Mamie thinks about this. And the other people, I've been in meetings where they told me this is where the recorders, the clerks are recording the minutes. I've been to the White House where people have basically said, you're in the wrong line. You should go to the visitors line. And so for a leader out there, understanding how important it is, your nonverbals are as important as your verbals, to be able to validate. Unfortunately, it's still necessary to do that. But right, that helps a lot, right? To change that image and what people think of you.
Absolutely. I think in the most healthy teams I've been on, it's when I'm viewed as a colleague from day one, where my voice is heard from day one, where I'm in what the situation is from day one, because the assumption is that I would bring value, even if it's the first day on that team.
Yes. Okay, so tell us, how did you all get here and what made you stay? So I'll start with you, Michelle. How did you get here? And give us a story. And why did you stay
here? So like I said, I wanted to study marine biology. But unfortunately, that wasn't in the cards because I had to attend state school, and University of Maryland did not offer a marine biology undergrad program. So I wasn't able to go to my dream school and kind of study my dream career. So I had to pivot. So that's how I found wildlife ecology. And then from that, I had my first internship with an organization called Casey Trees in DC. And they do a lot of work with the urban canopy. And I did environmental education with them. And that's where I realized my passion for environmental education. And that's how I decided to become a ranger. I wanted to be the cool teacher. I wanted to be where the field trips went, not the ones that were the day-to-day, because I appreciate teachers so much, but I couldn't do it. I can't narrow down to one thing. I would love to just get every single grade, do all the field trips, do all that fun stuff, and then work out in the field. So then that led me to being a park ranger. And then once I was a ranger, I didn't realize that I was already doing inclusion, that I was already doing diversity, equity, even justice. So when a position came available, I looked at the job description and I said, I'm already doing all of that. But I'm doing it on a small scale. I'm only doing it in one park. So what can I do to make it better for everybody? Because I could see myself in these visitors. Most of the visitors that are coming to the parks are Latinx. And I could see the way that my family recreated. So I wanted to help them. I wanted to help everybody that was underrepresented and give them a voice. And that's how I ended up in DEIJ. And sometimes I feel a little bit of imposter syndrome because I didn't study this. It's not something that I was trained to do, but I feel like I've been learning it slowly. And now a passion that I didn't know I have, I've finally been able to put into words.
Wow. And I have to tell you, you're pretty young to have found that early in your career. Most people don't get there that early. So yes, your turn. Tell me more, Sharisa.
All right. And I'm assuming by here, you mean just in my career, or do you mean on a Jedi front?
I'd like to hear first about your career. I'm sure some people would like to know, how did you end up at Fish and Wildlife Service, and what made you stay?
Well, I went to Virginia Tech also because Maryland didn't have at the time a wildlife degree program. And so I did get in-state tuition, even though I was a Maryland resident back in the late 90s by going to Virginia Tech. I wanted to be a veterinarian because at the time I thought I like animals. That's what people who like animals do. Interestingly, when I was at Virginia Tech, one of my undergrad research projects was, warning, it's a long title, investigating the factors and motivations that influence an African-American student's decision to pursue a career in the natural resource field. That was one title. And it was using focus groups to figure out how we could recruit more minorities into the wildlife field. Because at that point, once I had taken a few classes, my freshman year, I realized this is an alternative and it's one that I really, really enjoy. It turned out that when people love animals, they love animals. That's an inherent love that they can't recall one individual or instance sparking within sort of born. And even if they didn't have animals when they were little, they would stuffed animals as a reference. So for anyone who's trying to recruit, go to the pre-vet places and get those people to come over to ecology. Came to the Chesapeake Bay field office. It was not an easy transition. My initial supervisor definitely viewed me. He at the time had a daughter in high school and sort of viewed me as her. So he was very protective in the worst way, not letting me do anything. And what made me stay then, because those were dark days, were literally, and I'm so happy to see you on this call, people like Janet Norman, where I could go into your office and say, Janet, I'm so bored, I'm reading the dictionary. Who reads the dictionary? And Janet would offer really wonderful, but really real advice about how women were perceived in the workplace. And Janet, you gave me some really, really good advice in my initial years. So thank you.
Thank you. It was dark days under certain supervisors that we all just bowed down and had to grind through.
Yes. Yes, and that's exactly what happened. And then
19 years with that supervisor. But
Janet is still one of your greatest fans. Let me ask you all the next. Oh no, I didn't know if you were done yet. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I will wrap it up in 30 seconds. I'll just say that my immediate supervisor then became a BIPOC woman whose answer to everything was yes, as long as we can afford it. And she became a great role model. And everything sort of went up from there. Moved on to headquarters after 8 years in the field. And I've been at headquarters since 2006. And yes, there have been other dark days, very similar to the initial ones, but it's usually leaning on allies that got me through.
Yeah. So speaking of dark days, and I mentioned earlier some of the reasons why we encounter problems with creating safe and welcoming places. And one of them being that we were silent quite a bit. And there's still some fear around speaking our truths, right? Even though we know equitable collaboration is all about truth seeking, and it's all about others at the table being trauma informed about how we, who we are and how we got here. But I also mentioned this about early childhood experiences, which you guys have talked a little bit about, representation, cultural experience. And so, and then Janet mentioned microaggressions for sure. So where does this fear come from, and how do we overcome it where we don't feel like we can be specific about these dark days? I still have some days when I don't feel like I should tell people exactly what I think about it. And it's usually because they feel more guilty than I do, and then I accept their guilt about it. But I've been to places where I haven't been welcomed, in parks, in national wildlife refuges, where I was the supervisor and people thought that I didn't belong there, and told me that I shouldn't use the bathroom there because it was only for those who actually were visiting the refuge. So those experiences we've had. So how do you deal with that? The fear of not being able to really address this issue and hit it head on and give them feedback and make it a teachable moment. Michelle, you have, and then I'll see.
Sure. I have an example that I can think of. So I am white passing. I have blue eyes. I have fair skin. So that leads to a lot of awkward moments where people start talking bad about the Latinx population to my face, which has happened numerous times. So I think before I used to just feel awkward and smile about it. And now whenever somebody says something about, blaming the Latinx community for being the only ones that are bringing trash into the parks or leaving trash at the parks, and just kind of like blaming and pointing fingers, I take it as an I statement. So I'm like, oh, when I recreate with my family who's from Colombia, like we usually do this, or I make it a point to tell them that I am that population that they're talking about. And it makes them feel uncomfortable. And then it starts with the apology tour.
Mm-hmm.
And it ends up being a mess, but I feel like I'm still pretty young in age and in my career. So it's people like you, it's people like Sharissa who I like will look up to and learn by example, because I don't have all the answers and every situation's different. And it also depends what mood I'm in that day. Some days I'm ready to go to battle. Other days, yeah, I guess that's my version of an answer.
I love that. It's like some days you want to say, I know she didn't, or I know he didn't, right? Yes, Sharissa, any comments on that and how you deal with it?
I think in the past year, since there's been a trend towards more open conversation about this, it's been easy to address these issues. And I think grace is really important. I love that you us off in this meeting, or demonstrating verbally, this is a place and space of grace. But I also think everybody's recognized that over the past year, while we are more engaged in these types of conversations and people are more open to feedback, that it's a really awkward and uncomfortable conversation. And what I like to point out is that the moment is always awkward and uncomfortable for me. All I'm doing is now sharing that experience with you in hopes that it nips that trend in the bud. I'm giving you feedback. And I think that some people do now receive that as a gift and thank you, because I want to demonstrate behaviors that are more woke and cluing me in. That's something that I've said for decades, has for decades made my colleagues feel a certain way, but nobody felt comfortable until today to let me know. Thank you. The problem is that most times people don't respond like that. They immediately, well, you know how people respond if somebody called you a racist, because they automatically assume I'm calling them a racist when I'm not. I'm saying, gosh, that thing that was okay, just know it's not really okay. It's actually pretty hurtful. But people sometimes get defensive, and even people who self-identify as allies, the natural instinct is to say, but I'm not racist, but I didn't mean it that way, but I. And I would ask that you just receive it with more grace and say, thank you. What can I do about that?
Well, I think we should find that sweet spot, because some days I do feel sorry for some white men and because they're clumsy in many cases, you know, and it is hard because they've been told that we got to be perfect in this environment, right? And not only in the environment of dealing with these types of issues, but in general. And so it becomes, hard for them to take it. And it's about finding that sweet spot and finding those moments where it's going to really matter and that they're going to get something from it. But I can relate to some of them feeling this cultural council, where they feel, like there's nothing I can say, so I don't say anything or don't do anything. I also can relate to the angry Black woman syndrome as well. And so it's all about finding that sweet spot. So we talked a little bit about the challenges. You guys want to speak more to the challenges? Because I'm sure people on this call want to know, how do we create safe and welcoming places? We've been talking about where they don't exist. Any more discussion on where they do not exist, and some examples. We talked about a little bit about early childhood experience and representation, but I think we need a little bit more discussion around those two items, and then we can move on. So any more that you want to talk about in terms of early childhood experiences? Because we have lots of teachers on this call. What is it that you want them to know and do in their classrooms that's not the obvious? Because we know some of the obvious things that they can do.
Michelle, you or me?
I'll go first.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for me, what brought passion into the classroom is bringing the outside in. So I know we had a program where we raised diamondback terrapins and then released them back. And I think that was, and even like the sunfish in the classroom, all activities like that, anything, I'm just such a hands-on learner that the field for me is where I want to be. I took one class where we learned how to shoot blow darts and how to do like stick and pokes. And it's just, that classes like that really, really meant so much to me. And a teacher's passion. Like I can still remember going back to years back to teachers that were my teachers in 5th grade that just really believed in me and made a difference. And maybe one of the things that we always talk about is bringing people to the table. So, okay, you're teaching a whole class, but really bringing it to some kids, maybe wondering if they haven't had those experiences, why haven't they had their experiences? And if they want to have them, like camping, like you can change a whole person's life by taking them camping once. So I just think that teachers are so passionate about what they do. They have to be in order to have a job like that. And some students are going to be receptive, some aren't. But it's also important to know them culturally. Like if you go, like the Latino community goes to the park, but we tend to just picnic or we tend to fish. We don't make it out into the trails. So figuring out why, if you're at a park, why haven't you made it to the trail system? Why haven't you gone birding? Why haven't you gone herping? Things like that. So, I mean, everything could do with a little more cultural education. So I think that would be my one point.
Okay, Sharissa.
All right, early childhood experiences. I'm trying to digest that. That was a really excellent answer, Michelle. I would say that there are teachers that can make or break a memory for you or a self for you. So I've encouraged you to view all of your students as naturalists. I think there's a lot of unconscious bias that influences how we treat people or the conclusions that we draw, or even when we're attempting to help, the words that we use when trying to help somebody explore an outdoor space. So if a Black kid doesn't like bugs, you're like, there's a whole story that you build around that. Whereas if a white kid doesn't like bugs, he's just allowed to not like bugs. That's fine. People don't like bugs. But especially over the past year, since we've been having a lot of these conversations, I've been hearing a lot of unconscious bias woven into well-intentioned statements, like, we need more Black people to get outdoors. They don't like the outdoors. We need to get to them when they're young so that we can influence them to share our values. There's a lot packed into that statement.
Yeah.
But ask people to do is say, replace Black kids with women or French. And you would never say what we need to do, because women don't value the outdoors. That's why we don't have enough women who works. They don't value the outdoors, so we need to get to them when they're young, you know, before they to value them. No, it's because they're not welcome and they're told they don't belong. Now that's changing, and that's changed a lot, actually, in the past 15 years. But I would say watch your unconscious bias, because even the best, most beautiful people sometimes unconsciously weave a story around the person they're working with, be them a older person or younger person. And just they all have their own story. It has nothing to do with the amount of melanin in their skin, but it might have to do with how they've been treated.
Yeah, right. And that goes both ways too, because being teased because they do like the outdoors. If they, you don't know what we go through after we get in our own neighborhoods, if it's something that we liked. I was teased a lot for being an outdoor girl.
Oh yeah, because Black people don't do that.
We don't do that. And they call me Lisa Douglas from Green Acres because I love the outdoors, but I like to wear my earrings and pearls and all of that too, you know. So yeah, I think it goes both ways. Other challenges or ways in which we can address it, we can move beyond the early childhood and move to cultural experiences. We've had some of that discussion already, or the historical trauma, you know, so you all can speak to that, either of those if you'd like.
Michelle, you or me?
Sharisha, you can go first. Yeah. Oh.
Okay, I mean, for my point of view on this is going to be a little bit different. So I will just talk about like the cultural aspect of it. So if you know somebody from Latin America, it's likely that they grew up around some body of water. And that was their getaway. That was their free day. And I know when we were little, we used to go to the river by my grandma's, and my mom and dad would bring out the giant pot of rice and meat and everything. Nobody ever packed sandwiches. Nobody ever takes food that is like easily consumed, but it's got to be things that require plates and utensils and cleaning the pot afterwards and everything. And that's how they celebrated their days off with us. And that's still what's going on to this day. Is if you go to state parks, most of the Latinx population is going to be by the water, and they're going to be, again, bringing in like their carne asada. It's going to be full on breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because if you get there, you're going to use your whole day. You're not allowed to go to the park for 2 hours. You go and you eat. You stand on that, or you wait in line in your car, and you're gonna soak up every single second until it's time to close, because most people traveled from further away to get there. So I just feel like when we talk about things like leave no trace and recycling and even reusing, like the Latinx community has been doing that for years. We're the ones that, same with like brown and Black communities, we're the ones that use the leftover Tupperware, use this to repurpose it into that, to you don't even know what is in your fridge because it's different containers. Like we have always had this mentality with nature. And I feel like that gets taken away from us because it's viewed in a different lens.
Yeah.
So people, yeah.
Well, even quilting and all of those things. But you mentioned something I wanted to bring up, because when we talk about events and planning, we heard from our New Mexico National Wildlife Refuge folks, Jennifer Owens-White, in that they said, if you want, meet people where they are. And if you have an event, the music, the food, and the art will attract, Black and brown people to your functions. However,
we're very colorful.
Yeah, and also, but if you mention food at Fish and Wildlife Service, and I can talk about it because I'm not there. And I said, you guys have figured out a way to pay for food, or the Friends group will pay for the food. But I do think that we need to start thinking about ways in which we can do these things, not why we can't do them, right? If we want people to come.
There's an organization called Corazon Latino, and they work with U.S. Forest Service. And before they even start their programming, they feed. You go there, you start eating while during the introduction, there's drinks, there's everything. And then there's a warm-up dance with Woodsy the Owl, like, and then we get to the nature walk. Like, knowing your audience is very important. And I know it's not great to generalize, but sometimes it works.
And sometimes it works, yes. Sharissa.
There's a difference between stereotyping and generalizing a culture, I feel like.
That's great. Sharissa, anything you'd like to add to any of these discussions? Open mic now.
Open mic, heck yeah. I'm gonna go with the historical trauma.
Okay.
Please. But I did want to say a note about stereotyping and generalizing. I think a lot of people are they're so aware of the problem of systemic racism. And I love that everybody wants to address it. And I've never felt more positive in my entire life this past year. I've never felt more comfortable being Black at work. I've never felt more understood than I do right now. But it's something that is just hundreds of years that's been baked in. So a lot of people are saying, what should I do? As if I can give a list of 20 things and do it this way and you are golden. And the best analogy that I've heard thus far was a woman that I was on another panel with. She had taken French and her French teacher had said, you can learn French or know French until you immerse yourself in that culture.
Yeah.
And I think that's something, and I wasn't sure if I'd have a chance to say that again. That has nothing to do with the historical trauma that I do.
That's okay.
But I wanted to make sure that that was heard, because list of actions is not going to get you guys where you want to go. Like, to understand that less talk, less teaching, more listening, analyzing, even if you're doing it without realizing it, more listening and trying to integrate yourself within another culture. And immerse yourself within that other culture so that you can to understand what's needed. It's not going to be a list of something. But with regard to historical trauma, I am deeply rooted in the Maryland, DC, Baltimore area, and 6 generations on each side. We've tracked ourselves back to slave times. We've been Black the entire time. I also am white passing, but so are half the people in my family, which is a whole other story. But we've been Black the entire time. And I'm 1 generation removed from segregation. So I think even when you saw the video, the Fish and Wildlife Service video was made prior to the Biden administration, prior to the Trump administration. And we were still trying to create welcoming spaces. But I think even back then, the dialogue was, we need to get more Black and brown people to want to come to where we are, because they don't like to recreate. And that's the truth for so many people. But I know better because my father's from here and my mother's from here and my grandparents, great-grandparents. And before that, we were literally not welcome in those spaces. If we were seen in those spaces, we were made to leave those spaces. Scary, scary spaces. And we were given our own spaces. Like this area, we have Highland Beach and Carr's Beach and Sparrows Beach. Those were Black beaches. Of course, they weren't limited to Black people. If a white person wanted to go there, they could. But that was where we were relegated to. And same with hunting areas. You would never go hunting where there were people hunting, because those people had guns. And they did not want you there. They were the primo spaces. So we were relegated to definitely not the most beautiful areas. And of course, there are some people that said, well, this is what outdoor recreation is. No, thank you. Like, take me to the swamp where there's nothing but mosquitoes. I don't want to be here. Or some people would want to be there, but they would tell their children, but we don't want to go there. The answer, the truth was, we're not there. I'm not comfortable taking you there. You aren't going to be safe there. But you're not going to tell your child that. So instead, you say, we don't like going to places like that. Let's go to this other place instead that happens to not be outdoors and happens to not be outdoor recreational. There's a lot of reasons why people believe the myth and fallacy that Black people don't recreate outdoors. And Black people believe that myth, that Black people don't recreate outdoors because their mamas told them, we don't do that. But the truth was their mother would never feel comfortable taking them to that space because they would be looked at the entire time and people whispering, what are they doing here?
Right.
So, creating welcoming spaces, beautiful, because that's truly what we have to do now. Is say you are safe, you are welcome. Same with women in outdoor spaces, similar traumatic history. You are safe, you are welcome. We want you here, and you can whatever you want. You don't have to wear Tevas. Don't have to kayak. Create however you want.
Yeah. Okay, so now we can take a few questions from the audience. And Laura and Camille or whomever from Mayo, are you there? I've asked my questions. Let's see if we have any questions or comments from the folks in the field. I mean, not in the field, but in the Zoom room.
We do have some comments. We have Janet, who says extroverts like to see your face or image on calls, and that's how we connect and feel comfortable with people. This may be the second part of something you wrote, Janet. What about transforming the action issue that's problematic to a sports analogy? This is going back to being able to communicate with men. Like, hey, John, that was kind of a fumble on the play, and here's what it's like to do next time, which gives people the grace to improve.
Yeah, like the sandwich approach. Yeah, the sandwich.
Yeah. And then Chiquita, hi, Chiquita Crawford. Nice to see that you're here. She said, I think this is a comment about her experience, that young people like to learn with hands-on, and her son, who was diagnosed with Asperger, was told that he should attend probably a Montessori school to succeed, where they spend more time outside, but that was expensive and there was a waiting list, and she's wondering why public schools can't do more of that. And I think there is a move towards that, where with outdoor education, with outdoor classrooms, and even now in the last 18 months, maybe with COVID, and knowing that outdoors, being in the air is a good place. So maybe some of these things, kind of like you were saying, Teresa, are kind of coming together. You know, I keep saying that decade after decade, but here we have an opportunity. So can we take this opportunity?
This is a new chapter in America, and I really agree with Sharisa that, you know, it's good for us. I'm hoping we get it right this time. I am. Any questions? Or otherwise, I can ask another one of these ladies. Okay. Or are these just
here is a question from Diana. Do you have any thoughts about how to handle moving forward with DEIJ principles within a committee, but the committee moves very slowly? Any ideas?
Michelle, do you have any ideas?
I don't. I'll put this one to you.
All right. Yes. So what I've noted is in my history with our agency, this has always been a topic. It's a different feeling topic in the past year, but it's always been a topic, and we've never been able to advance it. And the reason why is because we're biologists. We are not racial equity professionals. Because we like to form groups, we like to make rules, we like to think that we can fix this problem, which is a majority problem, to think, right, oh, that I'm interested in this, I can go out and fix it and everything's fine. And right now I'm grouping myself with the majority because I'm identifying myself as a Fish and Wildlife Service person. And we're then surprised that it doesn't work when we're trying to do something. And we've never actually integrated ourselves within the community to even understand what the issue is, or to even really hear what the issue is, because we don't want to hear we're the problem. So imagine a group of people who are the problem sitting around trying to figure out, how do we solve that problem over there? Of course, it's not going to work. the other issue is that there isn't a known solution. I'm waiting to see it pop up. I'm waiting to see the model pop up. It's going to happen any day now because of what's happened in the past year.
Yeah, right.
Where groups will understand what are the steps you need to start taking to heal your culture. But we were just tasked, because this is one of Biden's 4 pillars, to figure out how to fix our Jedi culture. And the fun
Right.
it was when we came together and I said, gosh, all we had to do was sit down and think about this. Let's fix it. No,
Well,
if you asked us to build a suspension bridge, we would immediately say, let me go to a professional so I can get that done for you.
right. And that's
we're
what I
getting
tell them all
professional
the time. Treat it like it's a conservation issue. And I guarantee you, if we were dealing with bats with a problem, we'd bring the great people together and we'd study it and we'd figure it out and get it done.
Mamie?
Yes.
We have a question. Are there BIPOC spaces that a white woman should not join and respect that space? Do you understand that? Are there places where if you are wanting to help, but or be a part of the conversation, are there places where you shouldn't jump in?
I would treat it like French people. You go to France and walk into somebody's house and be like, I want to understand you. Find an ally in the BIPOC community and have them help.
And that's all a customized answer there. Don't you think it depends on the group? I think it depends on the individual and, and where they are. Someone's been to the Peace Corps in Africa might feel more comfortable doing that and know what to do and how to do it. Someone else, I took Rolanda with me to my church. And it was a really interesting experience. She lives in Maine, grew up in Camden, Maine, and it was an interesting experience for her to be there, but it was really enlightening. So like you said, find somebody that can go with you or find out what that group, because some groups will say, how dare you come in here? This is my own
right by the side of the house.
My refuge that I have from you too, So last comment from you, Michelle, before we close out. Believe it or not, we've been doing this for an hour now.
I would say that, again, generalizing, stereotyping. If you ask one person, if you ask me as a Colombian woman to explain to you all the nuances of the Latinx community, I can't do it. I'm one person and my culture is different than the Mexican culture, Salvadorian culture, things like that. So if you want to reach a specific audience, know who you're reaching, because it's very easy to say, I want to reach the Latinx community, but who does that compose of? So in Maryland, it's mainly Salvadorian. So then that's the allyship that you need to find in order to get into that community. So it's hard being, again, that token person that you're going to get all the questions and you're supposed to know all the answers. It's okay if you don't know all the answers. It's okay to point people in other directions. And I think we're all learning, and like Mamie said in the beginning, give each other grace. And I feel like I even learned so much today. So keep, like somebody said, this isn't just a one and done training, but keep the conversations going. Don't be afraid to broach these subjects with your coworkers, your friends. You'll learn so much about with talking about it and hearing other people's opinions. So thank you for everything, for having us today.
Thank you for sharing.
Women in Wildlife from the Wildlife Society is producing a book and it will be available for folks to consume. So please keep your eye out.
Great. And we are collecting resources. So Shariza, we can add that one to the website. I'm putting the link in the chat box now.
Continuing to
and I think, thank you so much. I'm going to turn this over to Curtis Bennett, who will close us out. And thank you, Mamie.
Thank you to Shariza and Michelle. Just thank you for sharing your story, your experiences, fostering such an amazing learning and growth environment for us this afternoon. And thank you to Dr. Mamie Parker for moderating the conversation. And just want to thank each and every one of you in the audience this afternoon for spending your time with us as the Maryland Association of Environmental and Outdoor Education. The recordings and the resources for this session this afternoon, as well as the prior 3 sessions as part of this 4-part series, will be found on the MAEOE website, www.maeo.org. And with that, I just want to say, again, a big thanks to everyone. Continue the conversations, and hope you all enjoy the rest of the afternoon.